Have you ever stood in a forest and asked yourself, who feeds this place? Who tills that soil? Who spreads the fertilizer? Who runs out with a hose during a drought? And yet, year after year, the forest grows thicker, richer, greener, more abundant. No one waters it, no one weeds it, no one buys it anything from a garden center. That question has followed me for years, because once you truly see what's happening on the forest floor, you start to realize that nature may have been showing us the answer the entire time. Today we're talking about a method so effective, so simple, and so strangely misunderstood that some people treat it like a forbidden secret. A way of covering the soil that can transform dead earth, protect moisture, feed the life beneath the surface, and change forever the way you think about gardening. If you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell, because what comes next may completely change the soil beneath your feet. To understand why this method works so well, we first have to abandon one of the biggest myths in modern gardening: the idea that healthy soil should be bare, clean, and constantly disturbed. For years, people have been taught that a proper garden should look tidy, neat rows of crops with exposed dirt between them, as if the more visible the soil, the healthier it must be. But nature tells a very different story. In the natural world, bare soil is not a sign of health. It's a warning sign. It's exposed, vulnerable, unfinished. The moment soil is left bare, nature moves quickly to protect it. That's why weeds appear so fast. They're not invading by accident. They're responding to a need. They're trying to cover a wound. And if you want to see what truly healthy soil looks like, don't look at a plowed field. Look at the forest floor. In a forest, leaves fall, twigs drop, branches break, and everything settles gently on the surface. Nothing is tilled, nothing is forced. Layer by layer, that organic matter forms a protective blanket over the earth. Beneath it, fungi, bacteria, and earthworms go to work, slowly converting that rough material into dark, rich humus. That is the original design. The deep mulch method simply follows that same pattern. You place a thick layer of wood chips over the soil and let biology do the rest. No digging, no mixing, no fighting the earth. Just cover, protect, and allow the life beneath the surface to rebuild the soil the way nature has always intended. But if the method is this simple and this natural, why has it become so controversial? And this is where the story takes a strange turn. The moment you try to bring the wisdom of the forest floor into a modern neighborhood, you can run into resistance. Not from nature, from people. What feels like common sense to a gardener can look like disorder to a municipal inspector, a homeowners association, or a zoning office. A thick layer of wood chips doesn't look like the polished image of a suburban lawn. It looks raw, natural, and to some eyes, that makes it unacceptable. Over the years, more and more gardeners have discovered that wood chips can put them on the wrong side of local regulations. In some communities, deep mulching is judged as neglected or abandoned, simply because it doesn't fit the manicured standard people have been trained to admire. There have even been cases where homeowners were questioned or taken to court for storing and processing wood chips on their own property, even when the purpose was simply to rebuild damaged soil. But the biggest pressure today isn't appearance, it's fire regulation. In fire-prone areas like California, new rules restrict organic mulch near homes and require non-combustible materials instead. The safety concern is real, and no responsible gardener should ignore it. But it also means that, in many places, the very material that builds living soil is being pushed out of the very spaces where people grow food and restore land. So now the question gets even stronger. If wood chips are this controversial, why do experienced gardeners defend them so fiercely and refuse to give them up? If you're finding value in this, hit the like button right now. It helps the algorithm show this to more gardeners who need it. Let's keep digging. The reason this method refuses to die is simple. People who actually try it rarely want to go back to the old way. And if we want to understand why deep mulching has inspired such loyalty, we need to look at two remarkable figures who helped bring this idea back into the modern gardening world. The first was Ruth Stout, a woman far ahead of her time, later known as the Queen of Mulch. She observed the endless cycle of plowing, hoeing, and weeding, and arrived at a bold conclusion. Most of that work was unnecessary. Instead of constantly disturbing the soil, she covered it with a thick blanket of spoiled hay and let the earth rest. She stopped tilling. She stopped fighting weeds the usual way. And what happened next was astonishing. Her garden responded with abundance, producing massive harvests, including huge potato crops, with no irrigation and no synthetic fertilizers. Then came Paul Gautschi, who took the idea even further through what became known as the Back to Eden method. Paul began using arborist wood chips, the shredded branches and leaves left behind by tree trimming crews, and applied them densely over his garden. What he understood was something many growers miss entirely. Trees mine minerals from deep in the earth and store that fertility in their branches, bark, and leaves. When those materials are chipped and returned to the soil surface, they become more than mulch. They become a bridge between the deep earth and the surface life. On ground that had previously seemed rebellious and lifeless, Paul created rich, dark, spongy soil. But was this just the success of a few gifted gardeners? Or was there real science quietly backing them up the entire time? The surprising answer is that there was. Between 1951 and 1965, the USDA Soil Conservation Service conducted a long-term experiment in Marcellus, New York. This was not a quick backyard trial or a one-season garden test. It was a serious, multi-year study comparing 14 different soil management methods on crops, including tomatoes, sweet corn, snap beans, and cabbage. And among those treatments was a simple practice: spreading wood chips over the soil surface at a rate of 10 tons per acre. What makes this so important is the duration. 15 years is enough time to reveal what truly happens to the soil over time. And the results were hard to ignore. While unmulched plots steadily lost organic matter, the wood chip plots moved in the opposite direction. Their soil improved. Their structure improved. Their ability to harbor life improved. And the harvest reflected that change. Bean yields increased 23%. Cabbage yields increased 34%. This wasn't just a nice gardening idea. It was measurable, documented, and repeatable. Yet, instead of reshaping the future of growing, the study was published and then quietly set aside. The story becomes even more interesting when we cross into Canada and look at what researchers discovered about the hidden power inside young branches. Not all wood chips do the same work. Many gardeners hear the term wood chips and imagine that any shredded wood will deliver identical results. But that's not quite true. There's a big difference between old, dense trunk wood and the younger, living parts of a tree. Researchers at Laval University in Quebec, led by Professor Gilles Lemieux, studied what became known as Ramial Chipped Wood, or RCW, made from small branches less than about 3 inches in diameter. What they found was extraordinary. The youngest parts of a tree contain an enormous proportion of its nutrients, including proteins, amino acids, and minerals. These tender branches also contain forms of lignin that are especially important for the biology that builds soil. Once these fresh, chipped twigs are spread on the surface, a different process begins. Fungi move in first, especially white rot fungi that specialize in breaking down lignin. As they work that material, they do more than release nutrients. They help create stable humus and encourage the soil to form soft, crumbly aggregates that hold the balance between moisture, air, and life. On degraded land, that kind of transformation can be spectacular. Now let's address the biggest fear people have about using wood chips in a garden: the nitrogen lockup myth. The warning usually sounds dramatic. Wood chips steal nitrogen. They starve plants. They yellow leaves. They ruin harvests. And that fear has been repeated so many times that many gardeners accept it without ever asking one very important question. Under what conditions does this actually happen? The truth is, the warning isn't entirely false. It's just badly misunderstood. If you take fresh wood chips and mix them directly into the soil, then yes, microbes will use nitrogen as they decompose that carbon-rich material. In that situation, the nitrogen demand happens right where your plant roots are trying to feed, and the result can cause problems. But that's not the method we're talking about. The forest floor doesn't take fallen branches and till them into the earth. It leaves them on top, and when wood chips remain on the surface as mulch, the temporary nitrogen lockup only happens in that thin contact layer where the chips touch the soil. That means the effect is shallow, localized, and far away from most active feeder roots below. In fact, That low nitrogen surface layer can actually work in your favor because it makes conditions harder for many weed seeds to sprout. So no, wood chips applied correctly are not robbing your garden of anything. They're feeding a long-term cycle. As the lower layers gradually decompose, they begin releasing nutrients back, building fertility instead of draining it. And once you understand that, you can finally see why this method becomes even more powerful when water enters the picture. Bare soil loses moisture fast. The moment sunlight hits exposed ground, evaporation starts pulling precious water back into the air. In hot climates, that loss happens day after day, silently draining the reserve your plants depend on. A thick layer of wood chips changes that completely. It acts as a protective lid over the soil, slowing evaporation and helping the earth stay moist much longer after rain or watering. The chips themselves also absorb water like a sponge, trapping rainfall, holding it in place, and releasing it gradually as the soil begins to dry. That means less stress for your plants, less frequent watering, and a garden that stays more stable even when the weather turns harsh. But the real miracle isn't just moisture, it's temperature. In summer, bare soil can heat up brutally, enough to damage delicate roots and weaken the microbial life that keeps the soil functioning. Under a layer of wood chips, the soil stays remarkably cooler, calmer, and protected. Then in winter, the same mulch works in reverse, insulating the soil and buffering it from sharp temperature swings. Now, let me be honest about the challenges, because this part gets skipped too often. When you build a fresh, shaded, moisture-rich layer over the soil, you're creating ideal conditions for life. The good news is that earthworms and beneficial fungi love it. The harder truth is that slugs, snails, earwigs, and woodlice may love it too. In the early stages, especially during the first year or two, your garden may not yet have enough predators to keep those populations in check. That means tender seedlings can become easy targets. There's also the germination issue. Wood chips are great at suppressing weed seeds, but they can just as easily prevent your own seeds from establishing. Fine seeds like lettuce or carrot need direct soil contact, not a thick blanket of coarse mulch. So you need to pull the chips aside, create a clear sowing space, and only push the mulch back once seedlings are strong enough. And there's one mistake that causes real trouble: piling mulch against trunks and stems. When wood chips are packed tight against bark, they trap moisture, invite disease, and can cause rot. Always leave a breathing space around the base of every plant. Above all, remember that this system needs time. It can transform soil beautifully, but not overnight. So why, with all this evidence, does the standard advice remain the same? Why are gardeners and growers so often told to till, to spray, to feed the soil from bags instead of biology? At some point, you have to stop and ask a harder question. Not just what works, but what's profitable. Modern industrial agriculture runs on repetition and dependency. When you disturb the soil, you break the fungal networks that help move water and nutrients. You expose the soil, and organic matter burns off faster under sun, wind, and heat. Once the soil loses its structure and its life, it can no longer support healthy growth on its own. And that's when the purchases begin. First comes synthetic fertilizer to replace what living soil once provided for free. Then herbicides to control the weeds that rush into bare soil. Then pesticides to protect stressed crops growing in a weakened ecosystem. Now compare that cycle with a thick layer of arborist wood chips. In many places, those chips are treated as waste. Tree crews often need somewhere to dump them, and gardeners can sometimes get them for free. A grower who learns to build soil with mulch can reduce tilling, reduce chemical inputs, retain more moisture, and depend less on products that must be bought again and again. And that may be the real reason this method stays on the margins. You can't patent a wood chip. You can't turn the forest floor into a high-margin package. The more people learn to work with nature, the less dependent they become. So, here's how you start building your own version of Eden. Step 1. Choose the right type of wood chips. The best option is arborist chips, the mixed material from real tree trimming that includes leaves, bark, and small branches. That balance matters because it gives you more than just carbon. It gives you the living parts of the tree that decompose more effectively and feed the soil food web. Step 2. Prepare the surface. You don't need to rip everything out. If there's existing grass, mow it low. If tough weeds are a problem, lay plain cardboard directly on the ground to block light and weaken regrowth. Step 3. Before the chips go down, give the system a boost with a layer of compost or aged manure. That nutrient-rich layer helps young plants establish while the mulch begins its slower work above. Step 4. Spread the wood chips generously, about 4 to 6 inches thick across the entire area. Step 5. When planting, push the mulch aside and set transplants into the compost-rich zone below. For seeds, clear a strip of bare soil and let them establish first before moving the mulch back in. Then, watch what happens. Season by season, the bottom of that mulch layer will start turning into dark, rich, sweet-smelling soil. And once you see that transformation with your own eyes, you'll understand exactly why so many gardeners never go back. When you step back and see the bigger picture, this is about much more than mulch. For generations, we treated soil as something to conquer, something to force into producing with steel, chemicals, and constant disturbance. We broke its structure, we stripped its cover, and then we wondered why it got harder every year to grow healthy food. But the beautiful thing about soil is that it wants to recover. Nature isn't waiting for perfect conditions. It's always trying to heal, and the forest floor has been showing us that pattern all along. Cover the ground, feed the life underneath, let diversity return, let time and biology do what no machine can truly replace. So when you spread wood chips across your garden, you're doing more than conserving moisture or improving a harvest. You're participating in a restoration. You're turning what most people see as waste into structure, fertility, resilience, and life. You're working with the land instead of against it, and that changes everything. If this video changed the way you see the soil beneath your feet, subscribe and hit that like button. We're uncovering the ancient wisdom that modern systems tried to bury. Let's grow a future that works with nature. The next hidden treasure of the earth will be revealed soon.